across the vast expanse of Eurasia, stretching more than 10,000 kilometers from the Pacific shores to the Atlantic, lies a story older than civilization itself. A story of journeys, of empires, and of the most important network in human history, the Silk Road. For thousands of years, it wasn't just a route for trading goods. It was a bridge between cultures, a lifeline that connected the East to the West in ways the world had never seen. Here, goods like silk and spices crossed borders, but so did ideas, inventions, and religions that would shape the very fabric of humanity. Empires rose and fell along these routes, some built by the riches of trade, others torn apart by the forces of conflict and revolution. The Silk Road was more than just commerce. It was the beating heart of civilizations, pushing humanity forward, sparking exploration and connection in a way never before imagined. It was along these roads that the East and the West first met, where cultures that were once separated by thousands of miles collided and transformed one another. A journey that opened eyes, created lasting bonds, and changed the course of history forever. This is the untold story of the Silk Road. Not just a trade route, but the very thread that connected us all, shaping the world and the people we've become today. The origins of the Silk Road. The Silk Road, a name that evokes images of grand empires, exotic goods, and cross-cultural exchanges, is one of the most significant networks in the history of human civilization. But before it became synonymous with the trade of silks, spices, and other luxury items, the Silk Road began as a series of trade routes connecting the East with the West, allowing not just goods, but also ideas, technologies, and cultures to flow across vast distances. To understand the origins of the Silk Road, we must first examine the geography and the people who played a central role in its establishment. Geography and early civilizations. In the heart of Asia, the vast expanse of deserts, mountains, and plateaus provided the perfect backdrop for early trade routes. The most important of these was the Central Asian region, located between China to the east and the Mediterranean world to the west. This area was a crossroads for several ancient civilizations, from the nomadic tribes of the steppes to the powerful empires of the Chinese, Persians, and Romans. One of the most critical geographical features was the Iranian Plateau. Sitting at the intersection of major ancient trade routes, Iran has historically acted as a bridge for civilizations. To the east, ancient China's early dynasties had their eyes set on expanding their territories and networks of influence. In the west, the Mesopotamian civilizations of Sumer, Akkad, and later the Persians developed strong political and economic systems. The region's position, therefore, made it an inevitable hub for trade and cultural exchange. The origins of the Silk Road are often traced back to the Qin Dynasty of China, around 221 BCE, when the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, unified the Chinese states. However, it was under the Han Dynasty, around 130 BCE, that the Silk Road really began to take shape. The Han Emperor, Wu Di, saw the necessity of establishing contact with the civilizations to the west, not only for economic reasons, but also to strengthen China's defense against the nomadic Xiongnu people, who had been a continuous threat to China's northern borders. The first diplomatic mission. In 138 BCE, the Han Emperor sent out his ambassador, Zhang Qian, to establish diplomatic relations and open trade routes with the people of Central Asia. Zhang Qian's mission was groundbreaking, as he traveled through the dangerous deserts and mountains, encountering various nomadic tribes along the way. He eventually reached the lands of the Parthians in modern-day Iran, where he learned of the distant Roman Empire and the cultures living far to the west. Although Zhang Qian was captured by the Xiongnu for more than a decade, his return to China in 126 BCE marked the beginning of a new era in Asian and world history. His reports about the cultures and trade opportunities in the West sparked a tremendous interest in establishing direct communication and trade networks between the East and the West. His journey revealed the extent of the world's interconnectedness, and more importantly, it established the idea of the Silk Road, though the term would not be coined until the 19th century. The Han Dynasty and the rise of trade. The establishment of trade between the East and West was not immediate, but as the Han Dynasty consolidated its power, the trade routes flourished. These routes did not follow a single linear path, but instead branched out like a spider's web, each route connecting various cities and regions across the vast Eurasian continent. One of the primary goods sought by the West from China was silk. At the time, silk was a luxury fabric only available in the East, particularly in China. The demand for silk in the Roman Empire and later in other parts of the Mediterranean world created a market for it, and thus the Silk Road began to serve as a vital artery for commerce. By 100 BCE, the Han Dynasty had set up a series of outposts and trade posts along key parts of the Silk Road, particularly in Central Asia. This included the establishment of the Silk Road city of Dunhuang in present-day Western China, which became an important trading hub for goods traveling both east and west. From here, goods, ideas, and even religions spread to the farthest reaches of Eurasia. In addition to silk, the Chinese exported a range of luxury goods, including fine porcelain, tea, and paper. In exchange, they imported goods from the West, such as horses from the steppes, glassware from the Roman Empire, and woolen fabrics. Yet, the Silk Road was not just a conduit for material goods. It was also a space for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. The role of nomads and Central Asia. The central role of nomadic tribes in the establishment of the Silk Road is often underestimated. While empires like the Han and the Roman Empire are often credited with the creation and expansion of the Silk Road, it was the nomadic peoples of Central Asia who served as the vital link between these great civilizations. These nomadic tribes, particularly the Sogdians, who lived along the eastern edges of the Iranian plateau, served as intermediaries, traders, and even diplomats. The Sogdians were skilled merchants, fluent in many languages, and they established trading posts across Central Asia, facilitating the exchange of goods and information. They acted as cultural ambassadors, spreading not only goods, but also religious ideas, including the teachings of Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and later Islam. Central Asia, with its wide open spaces and strategic position between China, the Indian subcontinent, Persia, and the Mediterranean world, became a crossroads of cultures and peoples. In the cities of Samarkand, Bokhara, and Merv, Persian, Indian, Chinese, and Greco-Roman cultures coexisted and influenced each other. These cities became centers of knowledge and cultural exchange, where scholars, merchants, and pilgrims from various backgrounds came together to trade not just material goods, but also philosophies, scientific discoveries, and artistic traditions. In this context, the Silk Road was more than just a trade route. It was a meeting point for different cultures, where individuals could exchange ideas and practices, and where empires could come into contact with one another, sometimes in cooperation, but more often in competition or even conflict. The growth of the Silk Road and its expanding influence. With the Han Dynasty's consolidation of its power and the establishment of critical trade posts, the Silk Road quickly began to evolve into a dynamic network. This expansion was not just a result of China's growing influence. It was the collective effort of various empires, peoples, and civilizations that recognized the value of connecting east to west. The Silk Road became much more than a series of trade routes. It became a lifeline for cultural, technological, and religious exchanges. The role of the Parthians and Romans. As the Han Dynasty worked to strengthen its position along the eastern part of the Silk Road, the empires to the west were equally eager to engage with the expanding trade network. The Parthian Empire, based in Persia, played a pivotal role in facilitating the flow of goods between China and the Mediterranean world. As one of the most significant empires in the ancient world, the Parthians controlled key parts of the Silk Road, particularly along the route that connected Central Asia to the western reaches of the empire. The Parthian middlemen were essential to the success of the Silk Road. By controlling important trade cities like Ctesiphon and other hubs along the Euphrates River, the Parthians helped move Chinese silk, precious metals, and other luxury items across the ancient world. Their strategic location allowed them to mediate between the empires of the East, such as China and India, and the Western powers like the Roman Empire. The Romans, too, played a significant role in the development of the Silk Road. Initially, they were unaware of the extent of the trade network between East and West, but by the 1st century CE, the Roman Empire's appetite for luxury goods, particularly silk, had created a demand that could only be satisfied by direct access to the East. For the Romans, the allure of silk was irresistible. It was a symbol of wealth and prestige among the elite, and it quickly became one of the most coveted items in the empire. Rome's interaction with the Silk Road. The Romans' interest in the Silk Road was not limited to the fabric itself. They were also drawn to the exotic goods and innovations that came from the East. Roman traders began to establish routes through Central Asia, passing through Parthian-controlled territories. However, the Romans faced one significant challenge. They had to deal with the Parthians as intermediaries. The Parthians, recognizing their own economic advantage, were not eager to relinquish their monopoly on trade with the East. Despite the challenges, Roman demand for silk continued to grow. By the 2nd century CE, Roman emperors began to send official emissaries to the court of China. Though these missions were mostly unsuccessful in terms of establishing direct diplomatic ties, the Roman Empire's interest in the Silk Road remained strong. It was not long before the Roman elite became deeply embedded in the cultural and economic exchanges that flowed along the Silk Road. The spread of Buddhism. While the trade of goods and the development of political alliances were significant elements of the Silk Road, the most profound exchanges took place on a cultural and religious level. One of the most lasting impacts of the Silk Road was the spread of Buddhism from India to China and eventually to the rest of East Asia. Buddhism, which originated in India around the 5th century BCE, began to spread along the Silk Road in the 1st century CE. Early missionaries, often traveling with traders, brought Buddhist texts, teachings, and art along the route. The spread of Buddhism was facilitated by both the movement of people and the support of various empires that controlled key regions along the Silk Road. In the early days, Buddhism encountered resistance in China, but over time it began to gain followers, especially among the urban population. Monasteries were built along the Silk Road, and cities like Dunhuang became centers of Buddhist learning and cultural exchange. The artistic influence of Buddhism, including the creation of intricate murals and statues, spread rapidly through Central Asia and into China. By the 6th century, Buddhism had become a major religion in China, and its influence would continue to grow in other parts of East Asia. Silk Road cities, the heart of the trade network. As the Silk Road expanded, certain cities became the lifeblood of trade and cultural exchange. Among the most famous were Samarkand, Bokhara, and Nishapur, all of which were strategically located along the Central Asian trade routes. These cities flourished because they were not just commercial hubs. They were centers of learning, culture, and religious exchange. Samarkand, in present-day Uzbekistan, became one of the most important cities along the Silk Road. Its location at the crossroads of the western and eastern parts of the trade network made it an essential point for merchants and travelers. During the reign of the Timurids in the 14th century, Samarkand reached its zenith as a cultural and intellectual center. It attracted scholars, poets, and scientists from all over the world, contributing to the exchange of knowledge that characterized the Silk Road. Bokhara, another key city in Central Asia, was also famous for its intellectual and religious significance. The city became an important center for the Islamic world, with scholars, traders, and religious figures passing through. Bokhara's role as a center of commerce and culture made it one of the most influential cities along the Silk Road. Nishapur, located in modern-day Iran, was another critical city on the route. It was well known for its production of fine ceramics and its status as a hub for both trade and scholarship. The city became an important meeting point for Persian, Arabic, and Central Asian cultures, contributing to the region's vibrant intellectual climate. The expansion of the Silk Road into the Tang Dynasty. As the Silk Road network continued to grow, it reached its peak under the Tang Dynasty of China, 618 to 907 CE. The Tang Dynasty embraced trade and cultural exchange as integral parts of its foreign policy. During this period, China was not just a dominant political power, it was also an economic and cultural superpower. The Silk Road was crucial to the Tang's prosperity, as it allowed China to export its goods, knowledge, and cultural achievements to the world. The Tang Dynasty's capital, Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, became the epicenter of the Silk Road. It was a cosmopolitan city, home to traders, diplomats, and scholars from across Asia, Europe, and beyond. Chang'an was a melting pot of cultures, and its bustling markets were filled with goods from as far afield as Persia, India, and the Roman Empire. The city's thriving trade made it a key player in the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of not just material goods, but also ideas, religions, and technologies. The height of the Silk Road and cultural exchange. As the Tang Dynasty reached its zenith and the Silk Road flourished, the interconnectedness of East and West became more profound. This era was marked not only by the immense exchange of goods, but also by the deepening influence of cultural, technological, and religious ideas as they moved along the trade routes. The Silk Road had become more than just a trade route. It had become a symbol of global connectivity and shared human experience. The role of Central Asian empires. By the 8th and 9th centuries, Central Asia had transformed into a cultural and economic powerhouse, thanks to its position as the meeting point between East and West. The Sogdians, the primary intermediaries along the Silk Road, continued to thrive during this period. Their culture, language, and merchant networks spanned the length of the Silk Road, from the Iranian plateau all the way to China and beyond. The Sogdian merchants were known for their ability to speak multiple languages and their knowledge of diverse cultures, which made them indispensable to the Silk Road's success. In addition to the Sogdians, the Turkic Khaganates, who controlled much of the Central Asian steppes, became major players in the Silk Road's expansion. The Turks, with their vast nomadic empire, facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas across the region. By the 8th century, the Abbasid Caliphate in the Middle East had also become a powerful force in the Silk Road network, further extending its influence across Persia, Central Asia, and into India. The Abbasids were instrumental in facilitating trade and cultural exchanges between the Islamic world and China, India, and even Europe. Their capital, Baghdad, became a thriving center of knowledge, attracting scholars from across the world. It was during this time that Islamic science, mathematics, and philosophy were introduced to the West, along with the preservation and expansion of Greco-Roman knowledge, much of which was carried by traders and scholars traveling along the Silk Road. The spread of Islamic civilization. One of the most important cultural phenomena associated with the Silk Road during this period was the spread of Islam. Beginning in the 7th century, the Islamic caliphates expanded rapidly from their base in the Arabian Peninsula, first into Persia and Central Asia, and eventually into the Indian subcontinent and parts of China. As Islam spread, it became an integral part of the cultural and intellectual landscape along the Silk Road. The spread of Islam was facilitated by the trade routes, as merchants, travelers, and missionaries carried not only goods, but also religious ideas. Cities like Bokhara and Samarkand became thriving centers of Islamic culture, with scholars and theologians influencing the development of Islamic thought and jurisprudence. As the Islamic empires grew, so too did the scope of the Silk Road, linking vast swathes of Asia, Africa, and Europe in a network of trade, politics, and religion. Islamic scholars made significant advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, much of which was later transmitted to Europe. The translation of Greek and Roman scientific works into Arabic played a crucial role in preserving ancient knowledge, which would later contribute to the European Renaissance. Islamic influence also led to the development of new technologies, such as advanced irrigation techniques, which spread along the Silk Road and had lasting effects on agriculture in Central Asia and beyond. Cultural and artistic exchange. The Silk Road also served as a conduit for the exchange of artistic styles, architectural techniques, and cultural traditions. From the Chinese Tang Dynasty to the Islamic caliphates, the West to the East, art and architecture flourished, as different cultures encountered one another along the trade routes. One of the most visible examples of this cultural exchange is seen in the art of the Dunhuang Caves in China, which feature Buddhist murals that combine traditional Chinese artistic styles with influences from Central Asia, India, and even the Roman Empire. The murals in the caves tell the story of the transmission of Buddhism along the Silk Road, depicting not only religious scenes, but also cultural exchanges that occurred between East and West. In Central Asia, cities like Samarkand and Bokhara became renowned for their Islamic architecture, which blended Persian, Turkic, and Indian influences. The use of geometric patterns, elaborate tile work, and the distinctive blue domes became hallmarks of the region's artistic identity. The fusion of these diverse artistic traditions would later have a profound impact on the art and architecture of the broader Islamic world. The role of the Mongol Empire. The 13th century marked a turning point in the history of the Silk Road, largely due to the rise of the Mongol Empire under the leadership of Genghis Khan. The Mongols, initially feared for their brutal conquests, would come to play a critical role in revitalizing and expanding the Silk Road trade network. Genghis Khan's empire, which stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe, bridged the East and the West in a way that had never been seen before. After Genghis Khan's death, his descendants continued to promote trade, commerce, and cultural exchange across the vast Mongol Empire. The Mongol Khans established a stable and relatively safe environment for merchants to travel along the Silk Road, and under their rule, the volume of trade increased significantly. The Mongols played a key role in reviving the East-West trade that had waned during earlier periods of political fragmentation. They also facilitated the movement of goods, including silk, spices, and precious metals, and created an environment that allowed for the flourishing of ideas, art, and culture. For example, the famous Venetian merchant Marco Polo traveled to China in the 13th century and spent many years at the court of Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. Polo's accounts of his travels sparked European interest in China and Asia, further connecting the West to the East. The introduction of new technologies. The Mongol Empire also played a pivotal role in the exchange of technologies along the Silk Road. One of the most significant technological transfers was the spread of papermaking, which originated in China. The technique of papermaking gradually spread westward through Central Asia, reaching the Islamic world and eventually Europe. Similarly, gunpowder, another Chinese invention, made its way along the Silk Road and had a transformative effect on warfare in both the Islamic world and Europe. The Mongols themselves used gunpowder weapons, including bombs and rocket launchers, and they introduced these innovations to the regions they conquered. The spread of printing technology, as well as advances in agriculture, engineering, and medicine, further solidified the Silk Road as a vital conduit for the transmission of knowledge. From the Chinese development of new rice varieties that improved agricultural output to the Islamic world's contributions to mathematics and astronomy, the Silk Road was a critical artery for the exchange of ideas that shaped the course of human history. The decline of the Silk Road and the shift in trade dynamics. By the 14th and 15th centuries, the once vibrant Silk Road, which had connected the East and West for centuries, began to experience a significant decline. A complex web of factors contributed to this shift, including the rise of new trade routes, the Mongol Empire's fragmentation, the outbreak of the Black Death, and changes in maritime technology and navigation. These factors all played a role in transforming global trade dynamics, leading to the decline of the overland Silk Road. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire, which had once unified much of Eurasia under a single banner, began to fragment after the death of Genghis Khan in 1227. The empire, divided among his descendants, led to internal conflicts and regional power struggles. The peaceful environment that had allowed trade to flourish began to unravel, and many of the territories that once served as Silk Road hubs became unstable or fell under the control of smaller, competing states. One of the most significant blows to the Silk Road was the fall of the Han Dynasty in China, 1271 to 1368. The Mongol rulers of China were replaced by the native Chinese Ming Dynasty, which turned inward, becoming more focused on consolidating its power within China and restricting foreign trade. As China's policies became more isolationist, trade along the Silk Road began to decline. At the same time, the rise of powerful new empires in the Middle East, such as the Ottomans, further complicated the Silk Road's network. The Ottomans, who controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean and parts of the Arabian Peninsula, were more focused on controlling maritime trade routes, rather than the overland Silk Road. As a result, they were less invested in maintaining the old trade routes that had once been vital to the Silk Road's success. The Black Death, a catastrophic event. Another crucial factor in the decline of the Silk Road was the outbreak of the Black Death in the 14th century. The plague, which originated in Central Asia, spread across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, killing millions and causing widespread social and economic upheaval. The plague made its way along the very same trade routes that had connected East and West for centuries. As the disease spread across the Silk Road, it decimated entire populations, including key trading hubs. The Mongol Empire, already weakened by internal strife, was further devastated by the plague, which significantly disrupted trade and commerce. The movement of goods and people along the Silk Road slowed to a halt, and many cities that had once been prosperous trade centers were abandoned or fell into ruin. The Black Death not only decimated populations, but also had a lasting impact on the political and economic structures of Eurasia. The disruption of trade networks and the weakening of empires contributed to the fragmentation of the once vibrant Silk Road. The rise of maritime trade. As the overland Silk Road faltered, a new chapter in global trade began to unfold. The rise of maritime trade routes. Beginning in the 15th century, European explorers such as Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus began to seek new sea routes to Asia, bypassing the overland Silk Road altogether. The development of advanced navigational tools, such as the compass and astrolabe, along with the increased use of more durable ships, made long-distance sea travel more feasible. European explorers sought direct access to the lucrative markets of Asia, particularly for spices, silk, and other luxury goods. The discovery of sea routes to India and China marked the beginning of a new era of trade, one that would ultimately eclipse the Silk Road's dominance. Portuguese and Spanish explorers were among the first to establish maritime trade routes to Asia. Vasco da Gama's successful voyage to India in 1498, for example, opened up direct trade links between Europe and the Indian subcontinent, effectively circumventing the Silk Road. This shift in focus from land-based to sea-based trade networks greatly diminished the significance of the Silk Road. The Ottoman Empire and the closure of the Silk Road. The Ottoman Empire and the closure of the Silk Road. The Ottoman Empire, which controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean and key parts of the Silk Road's western terminus, also played a crucial role in the decline of the trade routes. By the late 15th century, the Ottomans were focusing more on consolidating their own power in the region and less on facilitating the cross-continental trade that had once been so vital. In 1453, the Ottomans captured Constantinople, the gateway between Europe and Asia. This shift in power effectively closed off the traditional overland routes between Europe and Asia, and the Ottomans began to dominate the trade of luxury goods across the Mediterranean. As Ottoman control over key trade hubs solidified, European merchants turned increasingly toward maritime routes to bypass Ottoman-controlled land routes. The closure of Constantinople and the disruption of traditional trade routes forced European nations to find alternative ways to reach Asia, particularly through sea exploration. This period marked the end of an era for the Silk Road as the center of global trade, as attention shifted toward new sea routes and the colonial expansion of European powers, technological shifts, and new global powers. While the Silk Road decline was precipitated by several factors, the emergence of new global powers and technologies also played a pivotal role. The arrival of the Age of Exploration ushered in a new period in which European empires, such as Spain, Portugal, France, and England began to dominate global trade through maritime routes. The advent of the printing press, gunpowder, and advanced cartography gave Europeans the technological edge they needed to build global empires and establish new trade routes. European colonial powers expanded into the Americas, Asia, and Africa, creating a new economic system based on global sea trade rather than the ancient land routes of the Silk Road. This new global economy focused primarily on the extraction of resources, the establishment of colonies, and the control of maritime trade routes. As a result, overland trade diminished, and the once vibrant Silk Road became less relevant in the context of an increasingly interconnected world. the legacy of the Silk Road and its influence on modern trade and culture. Despite the decline of the Silk Road as a primary trade route by the 15th century, its legacy continues to resonate today. The cultural exchanges, innovations, and commercial networks that emerged from the Silk Road have had an enduring impact on global trade, technology, art, and even the way nations interact. The Silk Road may have diminished in importance as a physical trade route, but its cultural and historical influence has shaped the world in profound and lasting ways. The cultural exchange, East meets West. One of the most enduring legacies of the Silk Road is the cultural exchange that took place between the East and the West. This exchange was not limited to goods alone. It also included ideas, religions, philosophies, and artistic traditions. Over the centuries, the Silk Road allowed different civilizations to interact, influence one another, and share knowledge that would lay the groundwork for future cultural developments. For example, the spread of Buddhism from India to China, Korea, and Japan is one of the most significant cultural impacts of the Silk Road. Buddhism, which was introduced to China as early as the 1st century CE, traveled along the trade routes, spreading across Asia and deeply influencing the region's art, architecture, philosophy, and society. The Buddhist cave temples in Dunhuang, China, and the famous Buddhist art in Japan and Southeast Asia are all products of this exchange. Similarly, Islam spread along the Silk Road from the 7th century onwards, reaching Central Asia, India, China, and eventually parts of Southeast Asia. The interaction between Islamic and Chinese cultures, especially during the Tang and Yuan dynasties, led to the development of unique art forms, scientific discoveries, and philosophical ideas that were shared between civilizations. In the West, the Renaissance saw the rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman texts that had been preserved and expanded upon by scholars in the Islamic world, thanks to the movement of knowledge along the Silk Road. These texts, once thought lost to the West, became the foundation of European intellectual revival. Technological advancements and innovations. The exchange of technological innovations along the Silk Road is another enduring legacy. Several key technologies that we now take for granted were transferred across regions thanks to the network of trade routes. Perhaps the most notable of these innovations is the art of papermaking, which originated in China. Papermaking spread westward along the Silk Road, reaching the Islamic world, where it was perfected. By the 8th century, paper had spread to Europe, revolutionizing the way knowledge was recorded and disseminated. The development of paper allowed for the printing press to emerge in the West, which played a central role in the intellectual and cultural movements of the Renaissance. Similarly, gunpowder, which was invented in China, spread westward through the Silk Road, having a profound effect on warfare in both the Islamic world and Europe. The use of gunpowder in firearms and cannons would ultimately transform the military landscape of Europe and Asia. The introduction of new agricultural technologies along the Silk Road also played a pivotal role in the development of societies. Crops such as cotton, rice, and sugarcane, which were cultivated in India, Persia, and China, were introduced to new regions through the trade routes. The exchange of agricultural practices led to significant changes in farming techniques and the development of new crops in different parts of the world. The rise of modern trade routes. While the traditional overland routes of the Silk Road eventually declined, the spirit of the Silk Road still lives on in modern trade networks. The concept of global trade that emerged during the Silk Road era laid the foundation for the complex and interconnected global economy that exists today. The shift to maritime trade routes and the advent of the age of exploration eventually gave way to the global trade networks we are familiar with today. But the same principles of cultural exchange, commerce, and communication continue to drive international trade. One of the most significant contemporary equivalents of the Silk Road is the Modern Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a massive infrastructure and economic project launched by China in 2013. The BRI aims to revive the ancient Silk Road trade routes through the construction of roads, railways, ports, and airports, connecting China with Europe, Africa, and beyond. This modern version of the Silk Road seeks to promote global trade and investment while fostering greater political and economic cooperation between participating countries. The Birai is not just about trade in physical goods, it also focuses on the flow of technology, investment, and ideas. In many ways, it mirrors the original Silk Road's role in facilitating cultural exchanges and the movement of people, knowledge, and innovations. Just as the ancient Silk Road helped lay the groundwork for the exchange of ideas and the spread of cultures, the Belt and Road Initiative continues this legacy by linking regions of the world through trade, infrastructure, and cultural collaboration, reviving interest in the Silk Road, tourism, and cultural heritage. The decline of the Silk Road in the late medieval period did not mean the end of its historical significance. In recent decades, there has been a renewed interest in the Silk Road, particularly in the form of tourism and the preservation of cultural heritage. Countries along the ancient routes, including China, Uzbekistan, Iran, and Turkey, have invested in preserving and promoting the Silk Road as a symbol of their rich historical and cultural heritage. Tourism along the Silk Road has grown dramatically in recent years, with travelers seeking to experience the ancient cities, landmarks, and monuments that once served as key points along the trade routes. The ancient cities of Samarkand, Bokhara, and Xi'an, along with the famous Buddhist cave temples in Dunhuang, have become popular destinations for those seeking to explore the history of the Silk Road. In addition to tourism, the Silk Road has also become a focal point for academic research, with scholars studying the history, culture, and impacts of the trade routes. These studies help deepen our understanding of how the Silk Road shaped global history and how it continues to influence modern-day international relations and trade. The Silk Road's enduring influence on global culture. The cultural exchanges that took place along the Silk Road continue to influence modern-day art, literature, cuisine, and architecture. Many of the foods we enjoy today, such as pasta, spices, and tea, were introduced to different parts of the world through the Silk Road. Similarly, architectural styles from Persia, India, and China can still be seen in the buildings and structures across Central Asia and beyond. In the world of art, the Silk Road's impact can be seen in the blending of artistic traditions. The fusion of Indian, Persian, Central Asian, and Chinese styles resulted in unique artistic expressions, such as the intricate design seen in the Buddhist murals of Dunhuang and the grand architectural structures of Samarkand. These artistic traditions continue to inspire contemporary artists and architects today. The literary traditions of the Silk Road have also endured. Works of literature, poetry, and philosophy from diverse cultures, whether Islamic, Buddhist, or Confucian, continue to be studied and celebrated for their contributions to human thought and culture. The Silk Road's impact on modern globalization. The impact of the Silk Road extends far beyond the realm of historical trade. It serves as an early example of globalization, an interconnected world where people, goods, and ideas move across continents. The complex networks of commerce and culture that flourished along the Silk Road laid the groundwork for the globalized world we live in today. The birth of global commerce. The Silk Road played a crucial role in the development of international commerce. At its peak, it was not just a physical route for goods, but also a network that connected different economic systems, enabling markets across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe to integrate in unprecedented ways. The exchange of goods, from luxury items like silk and spices to everyday commodities like paper and metals, became the foundation of the global trading system. The system of credit and financial tools that emerged along the Silk Road was one of its most enduring contributions to modern commerce. Early banking practices, including letters of credit and promissory notes, were used by merchants to facilitate trade across vast distances. These financial instruments allowed traders to conduct business without needing to carry large amounts of currency, and they laid the groundwork for modern banking systems that we still rely on today. Additionally, the rise of trading cities along the Silk Road, such as Samarkand, Baghdad, and Constantinople, can be seen as the precursors to today's global financial hubs. These cities were centers of economic power, where merchants from all over the world came to exchange goods, ideas, and even currency. The urban centers that once flourished as key points on the Silk Road transformed into the global cities we know today, such as London, New York, Shanghai, and Dubai. Technological and scientific knowledge transfer. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Silk Road was the transfer of knowledge across cultures. Not only were physical goods exchanged, but technologies and scientific ideas moved along the trade routes, contributing to the development of civilizations. One of the key examples of this is the spread of agricultural techniques. As crops like rice, cotton, and sugarcane moved along the Silk Road, so did the knowledge of how to cultivate them. This transfer of agricultural technology had a lasting effect on farming practices across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The knowledge of irrigation techniques, for instance, spread from the Persian Empire to India and China, leading to improved crop yields and the development of new agricultural techniques in various regions. The spread of technological innovations, such as gunpowder, papermaking, and printing, had an even more profound impact on world history. Gunpowder, which had been invented in China, was introduced to the West via the Silk Road and altered the course of warfare in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Similarly, the introduction of paper to the Islamic world and Europe revolutionized communication and knowledge sharing, leading to the development of printing technology and the rise of literature, scientific progress, and literacy in these regions. The transmission of knowledge was not limited to the physical sciences. The Silk Road also facilitated the spread of philosophical ideas, especially in terms of religion and ethical teachings. The movement of Buddhism from India to China and eventually to Korea and Japan had an immense influence on East Asian culture, leading to profound changes in art, literature, and philosophy. In the same way, the spread of Islam along the Silk Road brought with it philosophical and theological developments that would shape the course of history in the Islamic world and beyond. The Silk Road and the rise of empires. The strategic importance of the Silk Road in terms of military and economic power cannot be overstated. As civilizations began to develop, the empires that controlled the Silk Road routes became some of the most powerful in the world. For example, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Persian Empire, and the Mongol Empire all benefited greatly from the resources and wealth generated through trade along the Silk Road. The Byzantine Empire, situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, leveraged its position to become an important player in Silk Road trade. The city of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, was one of the Silk Road's most significant commercial hubs. Through its control of key points on the trade routes between East and West, the Byzantine Empire had access to vast wealth from goods such as silk, spices, and precious metals. The rise of the Mongol Empire in the 13th century further transformed the Silk Road into a truly global trade network. Genghis Khan's conquests united large parts of Eurasia, creating a vast, unified region that allowed merchants to travel safely across Central Asia and beyond. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, provided stability and security along the trade routes, fostering the flourishing of trade, culture, and diplomacy. The Mongols also facilitated the exchange of knowledge between the East and West, acting as intermediaries between the Islamic world, China, and Europe. The Mongols not only brought goods, but also ideas, which furthered the development of many of the world's civilizations. As these empires rose and fell, they left their mark on the Silk Road, shaping the political landscape of Eurasia for centuries. The empires that controlled the Silk Road routes were often the centers of cultural, religious, and technological exchange, which contributed to the development of the modern world. The economic power generated through trade along the Silk Road allowed these empires to support advancements in art, architecture, science, and religion, which continue to influence us today. The influence of the Silk Road on modern diplomacy and geopolitics. The idea of interconnectedness and the strategic importance of trade routes, which the Silk Road exemplified, has become a key concept in modern geopolitics. In today's world, nations continue to recognize the importance of trade routes and infrastructure in fostering economic growth and diplomatic relations. The Modern Belt and Road Initiative BRI, which seeks to revive the ancient Silk Road, highlights the continued relevance of the Silk Road as a geopolitical concept. China's ambitious BRI project aims to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa through a network of infrastructure projects that include roads, railways, ports, and energy pipelines. The initiative echoes the same strategic considerations that motivated ancient empires to invest in the Silk Road and demonstrates how modern countries continue to prioritize global trade routes. The legacy of the Silk Road can also be seen in the way modern nations approach international diplomacy and trade agreements. The concept of economic cooperation and the importance of cultural exchange, both of which were at the heart of the Silk Road, continue to shape modern global policies. Trade agreements, international summits, and cross-border initiatives all draw on the lessons of the Silk Road era, when the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures created the foundation for peaceful relations between distant nations. The rediscovery and preservation of the Silk Road. As centuries passed and the overland trade routes of the Silk Road lost their dominance, the interest in this ancient network of commerce and culture faded into history. However, in the 19th and 20th centuries, a renewed fascination with the Silk Road emerged, and efforts to rediscover and preserve its legacy began in earnest. The archaeological exploration of the Silk Road brought to light forgotten cities, relics, and stories that have shaped modern understanding of its cultural and historical significance. The role of archaeology in rediscovering the Silk Road. The modern rediscovery of the Silk Road owes much to the work of pioneering archaeologists and explorers. In the mid-19th century, a wave of Western explorers, motivated by both academic curiosity and national interest, began to travel to Central Asia and China to investigate the ancient trade routes. One of the most famous figures in this effort was the German-born archaeologist and explorer Albert von Lecoq. He led expeditions to the ancient Silk Road cities of Turfan and Dunhuang in the early 20th century. His discoveries of Buddhist texts, murals, and artifacts shed new light on the religious and cultural exchanges that had taken place along the trade routes. At the same time, British archaeologist Aurel Stein made significant contributions to the study of the Silk Road. Stein's expeditions to Central Asia and Western China uncovered many ancient manuscripts, relics, and documents, some of which were Buddhist scriptures. His work helped piece together the historical narrative of the Silk Road's cultural and religious importance. His discoveries were particularly notable at sites like Dunhuang, where he uncovered a treasure trove of manuscripts that had been hidden away for centuries in the Buddhist caves along the trade route. These explorers not only uncovered material objects, but also contributed to the broader understanding of the Silk Road as a conduit for cultural and religious exchange. Their efforts revived interest in the Silk Road and sparked an era of scholarship that would continue into the 20th and 21st centuries. Preserving the heritage of the Silk Road. As the 20th century progressed, the importance of preserving the Silk Road's heritage became increasingly recognized. Many of the ancient cities and landmarks that once flourished along the trade routes were now in ruins, and some had been lost to time. Efforts to protect these sites gained momentum, and international cooperation began to play a significant role in their preservation. One of the most significant efforts to preserve the Silk Road's legacy came with the inclusion of several Silk Road cities and monuments in UNESCO's World Heritage List. Cities like Samarkand, Bokhara, and Xi'an were designated as World Heritage Sites due to their historical and cultural importance. These cities, which had served as critical hubs of commerce, religion, and cultural exchange, are now celebrated not only for their role in the past, but also for their continued relevance in modern times. In China, the caves of Dunhuang, famous for their Buddhist art and manuscripts, have become an iconic symbol of the Silk Road's cultural legacy. The Dunhuang Academy was established to study, protect, and preserve these ancient cave temples and the priceless artifacts they contain. The preservation of Dunhuang and similar sites has become a central focus for Silk Road studies, attracting scholars and tourists from around the world. In Central Asia, nations like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan have invested in restoring Silk Road sites, such as the Registan in Samarkand, the Ark Fortress in Bokhara, and the ancient city of Merv in Turkmenistan. These cities, once centers of trade, learning, and culture, are now important landmarks that attract thousands of visitors each year. Their restoration and preservation are vital not only for tourism, but also for maintaining the cultural heritage of the region. The role of Silk Road museums and exhibitions. In addition to the physical preservation of Silk Road sites, museums and exhibitions have played a crucial role in bringing the history and cultural exchange of the Silk Road to a global audience. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, exhibitions featuring Silk Road artifacts have toured major cities worldwide, showcasing the richness and diversity of the cultures that once thrived along the trade routes. One of the most notable exhibitions was the 1980s Treasures of the Silk Road display, which showcased thousands of artifacts from countries along the Silk Road, including China, Iran, and Central Asia. The exhibition highlighted not only the beauty and craftsmanship of Silk Road artifacts, but also the cultural and technological achievements that were exchanged along the routes. The success of such exhibitions helped to reignite global interest in the Silk Road and solidified its importance as a key element of world history. Silk Road museums, such as the Silk Road Museum in Xi'an, China, and the Central Asia Museum in Samarkand, continue to serve as important institutions for preserving and interpreting the history of the Silk Road. These museums house artifacts such as ancient textiles, ceramics, manuscripts, and religious relics that offer a glimpse into the lives of the people who once lived and traded along these routes. The rise of digital technologies has also contributed to the preservation and dissemination of Silk Road history. Digitization projects have allowed for the online sharing of ancient manuscripts, artworks, and archaeological findings, making these treasures accessible to a global audience. This virtual preservation ensures that even if physical sites are damaged or lost, their historical significance can still be shared and studied by future generations. The Silk Road's cultural revival in modern times. The interest in the Silk Road has not been limited to historical preservation. In recent decades, there has been a cultural revival inspired by the themes of the Silk Road. Music, art, literature, and even fashion have all been influenced by the cross-cultural exchanges that took place along the Silk Road. Modern artists, writers, and filmmakers have drawn inspiration from the Silk Road's rich history of cultural blending. Literary works that explore the themes of the Silk Road, such as The Silk Road by Peter Frankopan and The Travels of Marco Polo, continue to capture the imagination of readers. These books, along with numerous documentaries and films, bring the story of the Silk Road to a new generation. In the realm of fashion, designers have incorporated elements of Silk Road textiles and patterns into their work, drawing upon the vibrant and diverse styles that developed through centuries of cultural exchange. This has helped to revive interest in traditional Silk Road garments, such as the elaborate silk robes of China and the intricate carpets of Persia. The music of the Silk Road has also found a place in the modern world, with musicians and composers blending traditional instruments and melodies from countries along the Silk Road. International music festivals, such as the Silk Road Festival in Xi'an, celebrate the musical diversity that developed along the ancient trade routes, showcasing performances by artists from China, India, Iran, and Central Asia. The Silk Road in popular culture and modern perception. As the ancient trade routes of the Silk Road fade further into the past, they have remained an enduring symbol of global exchange and cross-cultural collaboration. In modern times, the story of the Silk Road has evolved into a powerful narrative that has permeated popular culture, art, literature, and even political discourse. Today, the legacy of the Silk Road is celebrated not only by historians and archaeologists, but by filmmakers, novelists, artists, and global leaders. The Silk Road in literature. One of the most significant ways in which the legacy of the Silk Road has been preserved is through literature. The idea of the Silk Road as a conduit of ideas, people, and stories has inspired countless authors over the centuries. From early explorers' journals to modern novels, the Silk Road has been a central theme for writers who explore its cultural, historical, and economic impact. In the 13th century, the travels of Marco Polo, whose adventures along the Silk Road were recorded in the Travels of Marco Polo, became one of the most famous accounts of the region. Polo's descriptions of his travels through Central Asia, the Mongol Empire, and China sparked the imaginations of generations of readers and brought the faraway lands of the Silk Road to life in the West. In modern literature, the Silk Road continues to serve as a fertile ground for storytelling. Writers like Peter Frankopan, in his book The Silk Roads, A New History of the World have reimagined the Silk Road as a central player in the history of global civilization, offering a fresh perspective on the ancient routes that shaped world events. Frankopan's work presents the Silk Road as a dynamic and ongoing process of cross-cultural exchange that stretches far beyond the past. Contemporary fiction has also been deeply influenced by the Silk Road. Novels like The Red Tent by Anita Diamond, which imagines the ancient world of the Middle East and Central Asia, and The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C., which touches on the trade of tea along the ancient routes, weave the legacy of the Silk Road into their narratives. These works explore the emotional and cultural connections that link the peoples of the Silk Road, drawing on themes of family, identity, and travel. Film and documentaries. Films and documentaries have also played a major role in shaping the modern perception of the Silk Road. From historical epics to travel documentaries, the allure of the Silk Road's exotic locales and the fascinating stories of the people who traveled its vast expanse continue to captivate audiences. One of the most prominent films that explores the themes of the Silk Road is The Silk Road 1949, a Hollywood adventure film that captures the spirit of the trade routes during the early days of the 20th century. Although largely fictionalized, the film embodies the romance and mystery associated with the historical Silk Road, focusing on the idea of exploration, danger, and discovery. In more recent years, documentaries have taken on the task of revisiting the ancient Silk Road, both as a physical journey and as a symbol of human connection. Shows such as The Silk Road by the National Geographic Society and The Lost Worlds of the Silk Road offer immersive explorations of the geography, history, and people of the region. These documentaries often blend historical analysis with present-day storytelling, showcasing how modern civilizations are still impacted by the trade routes that once connected them. One particularly influential documentary series is Marco Polo, The King's Road, which follows the journey of modern travelers retracing Polo's legendary journey along the Silk Road. The series delves into the landscapes and cultures that Polo encountered, offering viewers a vivid picture of how the Silk Road looked in the past and how it has evolved into the modern world. The Silk Road in modern art and fashion. The impact of the Silk Road is also felt in the world of modern art and fashion. The exchange of artistic techniques, design aesthetics, and material culture along the Silk Road helped shape the visual languages of multiple civilizations, leaving an indelible mark on contemporary art. Silk, with its association with the luxurious textiles that traveled the Silk Road, remains a key symbol in fashion today. Designers regularly incorporate elements inspired by Silk Road traditions into their collections. Fabrics, patterns, and motifs derived from China, Persia, India, and Central Asia are often featured in runway shows, with their rich colors and intricate designs reflecting the enduring influence of the ancient trade routes. Fashion houses like Dior, Chanel, and Valentino have drawn inspiration from the opulent silk robes of the Han Dynasty or the intricate patterns of Persian carpets. These references to Silk Road styles speak to the ongoing fascination with the aesthetics of the East and the lasting appeal of a cultural exchange that shaped both the fashion industry and global design. Artists also use the themes of the Silk Road to explore issues of migration, cultural interaction, and globalization. Contemporary artists, such as Zhang Huan and Shiren Neshat, explore the intersections of East and West, blending cultural influences and symbols that recall the Silk Road's legacy. These artists use their work to challenge traditional boundaries and celebrate the interconnectedness of the world, much as the Silk Road did centuries ago. The Silk Road in politics and global cooperation. The Silk Road's impact extends beyond culture and the arts. It also plays an important role in the political and diplomatic landscape of today. The idea of the Silk Road has been revived in modern geopolitics as a symbol of international cooperation, with governments recognizing the importance of global connectivity and cross-border collaboration. In recent years, the Chinese government has launched the Belt and Road Initiative BRI, a sweeping infrastructure and economic development plan that aims to recreate the Silk Road's global trade routes through modern infrastructure projects. These initiatives focus on the construction of roads, railways, ports, and pipelines that link China with Europe, Africa, and Asia. The BRI aims to revive the spirit of the Silk Road by fostering international trade, promoting economic development, and enhancing global connectivity. The BRI also underscores the historical importance of the Silk Road in fostering relationships between diverse cultures and regions. By connecting countries along the ancient Silk Road routes, China aims to create new economic opportunities and build stronger diplomatic ties between Asia, Europe, and Africa. This effort reflects the enduring relevance of the Silk Road's principles of cooperation and cultural exchange in shaping modern global politics. The Silk Road and globalization today. The continued fascination with the Silk Road in the modern world reflects the ongoing process of globalization. In many ways, the Silk Road was an early example of global interconnectedness, where people from different parts of the world exchanged goods, ideas, and cultures. Today, as the world becomes more interconnected through trade, technology, and communication, the lessons of the Silk Road remain vital. The modern global economy, characterized by the free movement of goods, services, and information, echoes the ancient trade networks of the Silk Road. The idea of a global network of interconnected trade routes is at the heart of today's supply chains, which stretch across continents. The digital age, with its instant communication and global commerce, reflects the same spirit of connection that defined the Silk Road. In popular culture, the Silk Road remains a powerful symbol of human potential for cooperation, exchange, and understanding. As nations work together to tackle global challenges, from climate change to economic inequality, the legacy of the Silk Road continues to serve as a reminder of the value of international collaboration and the richness that arises from cultural exchange. The modern-day Silk Road, connecting the world. As the world has become more interconnected through advancements in technology, trade, and transportation, the modern concept of the Silk Road continues to evolve. The ancient routes that once linked distant cultures are now being reimagined in new forms, both physical and virtual. From a revival of traditional trade routes to the rise of digital commerce, the legacy of the Silk Road is playing a key role in shaping the globalized world we live in today. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI. One of the most prominent modern efforts to recreate the spirit of the Silk Road is China's Belt and Road Initiative BRI. Launched in 2013 by President Xi Jinping, the initiative aims to rebuild the historic Silk Road trading network through infrastructure investments and economic partnerships across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The BRI is often referred to as the New Silk Road because of its goal of reconnecting the East with the West through a vast network of roads, railways, ports, and airports. The BRI consists of two primary components: the Silk Road Economic Belt, which focuses on land-based trade routes across Central Asia and Europe, and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, which focuses on sea-based trade routes that link China to Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe. This ambitious project seeks to foster economic development, promote international trade, and increase connectivity across continents. While the BRI has been hailed for its potential to boost infrastructure development and trade in participating countries, it has also drawn criticism. Some argue that the initiative could lead to a debt trap for developing countries that take on large loans to fund the infrastructure projects. Additionally, the political and strategic implications of China's growing influence along these new trade routes have raised concerns in some regions. Despite the controversy, the BRI demonstrates the continuing significance of the Silk Road concept in global economic and political relations. Digital Silk Road, the virtual age. In the 21st century, the Silk Road is not just a series of physical trade routes. It has also become a metaphor for the global digital economy. The rise of the internet, e-commerce, and digital platforms has created new avenues for trade and cultural exchange, resembling the ancient Silk Road's role in connecting distant cultures and markets. The concept of a digital Silk Road has emerged as countries, especially China, seek to expand their technological influence and improve internet infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and beyond. Through initiatives like Huawei's development of 5G networks and China's investment in global internet infrastructure, the Digital Silk Road aims to create a virtual bridge between East and West, promoting digital connectivity and economic growth. The digital revolution has transformed commerce in ways that echo the ancient trade networks of the Silk Road. Platforms like Alibaba and Amazon have enabled small businesses and entrepreneurs to access global markets, bypassing traditional trade routes and middlemen. Digital currencies and blockchain technologies, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, also reflect the globalizing force of the Silk Road, allowing for new forms of international trade and financial transactions. While physical goods still flow along modern trade routes, the movement of information, services, and digital products has become an equally important part of today's global economy. The Silk Road, in its modern form, has expanded from the exchange of tangible goods to encompass the flow of data, knowledge, and virtual services across the globe. Modern trade and the evolution of global supply chains. In the modern world, the Silk Road concept can also be seen in the vast global supply chains that power the world's economy. Goods produced in one country are often assembled, packaged, and sold in another, with multiple countries playing a role in the process. The goods that once traveled along the Silk Road, silk, spices, precious metals, and ceramics, have been replaced by electronics, textiles, automotive parts, and other modern products. However, the fundamental concept of global trade remains the same: the movement of goods across borders and cultures. Today, the modern-day Silk Road is not just about luxury goods, but about the exchange of products that fuel industries worldwide. Goods travel by sea, air, and rail, connecting factories, warehouses, and markets across multiple countries. The China-Europe rail routes, part of the broader BRI initiative, are an example of how modern transportation infrastructure is recreating the overland routes that once made the ancient Silk Road famous. The importance of the modern Silk Road was particularly evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. The global disruption of supply chains showed just how interconnected the world's economies are and how reliant modern economies are on international trade. During the crisis, countries that were once separated by the vast expanse of the Silk Road found new ways to collaborate, sharing medical supplies, vaccines, and technologies. As nations recover and rebuild from the pandemic, global supply chains are being redefined. The integration of technology, the rise of e-commerce, and the shift towards sustainable trade practices are reshaping how goods and services are exchanged. The idea of the Silk Road is as relevant today as it was in antiquity, not only as a symbol of connection, but also as a reminder of the shared challenges and opportunities that come with global cooperation. Cultural diplomacy and soft power. One of the key legacies of the Silk Road is the cultural exchange that occurred along its routes. Just as goods, technologies, and ideas spread along the Silk Road, so too did cultural influences, including art, religion, and philosophy. The ancient Silk Road was instrumental in the spread of Buddhism, Islam, and other cultural traditions that continue to shape the world today. In modern geopolitics, countries continue to use cultural diplomacy as a means of promoting their soft power, drawing on the historical legacy of the Silk Road. Through cultural exchanges, tourism, and educational programs, nations today seek to build stronger ties with others by fostering mutual understanding and respect. For instance, the cultural exchanges facilitated by China's Confucius Institutes, which promote Chinese language and culture around the world, are part of a broader strategy of soft power that seeks to strengthen China's global influence. Similarly, the United States, through programs like the Fulbright program, continues to use cultural diplomacy to engage with people from all over the world, building relationships and sharing knowledge. The Silk Road's enduring legacy as a cultural bridge between East and West has been revitalized in the modern era as nations seek to engage with one another not just through trade, but through cultural dialogue and collaboration. Today, more than ever, the Silk Road serves as a reminder that global cooperation and mutual understanding are essential to solving the complex challenges of the 21st century. The Silk Road's influence on global trade and modern economies. The Silk Road's legacy is not just a historical artifact. It has a lasting influence on global trade and the interconnected economies of today. The spirit of trade that flourished along these ancient routes continues to shape modern global commerce. While the specific goods and commodities have evolved, The fundamental concepts of trade, connectivity, and cultural exchange that the Silk Road pioneered are still integral to the modern economic system. Trade and economic integration. One of the central elements of the Silk Road was its ability to integrate diverse economies into a single, functioning trade network. Merchants, traders, and rulers from different regions of the world came together, exchanging goods, technologies, and services. The exchange was not limited to tangible items. It included ideas, philosophies, and innovations, which allowed for the development of economies and cultures across vast stretches of land. The Silk Road served as an early example of global trade, where economic systems from China, India, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Europe were interconnected. This early form of economic integration allowed countries to specialize in particular goods and resources, creating an interconnected web of dependencies. For instance, China was known for its production of silk and porcelain, while the Middle East was famous for its spices and textiles, and Europe for its precious metals and wine. This specialization led to more efficient production methods and the growth of economies along the trade routes. Modern global trade, although far more complex and fast-paced, operates on similar principles of interdependence. The global supply chains of today reflect the same kind of economic specialization that was prevalent along the ancient Silk Road. Countries now rely on each other for resources, manufacturing capabilities, and technological advancements. The globalized trade systems of the present, reliant on modern infrastructure like shipping lanes, railways, and airports, can be seen as the modern-day counterparts to the trade routes that once spanned Asia, Europe, and Africa. The rise of emerging markets. One of the most profound changes in the modern global economy has been the rise of emerging markets. As countries such as China, India, and other nations in Southeast Asia have undergone rapid economic development, they have come to play a central role in global trade. This shift has been aided by the renewed focus on trade routes, reminiscent of the ancient Silk Road, and by the broader process of economic integration that has been a hallmark of globalization. The Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), launched by China in 2013, is perhaps the most ambitious modern attempt to reconnect the world through trade, echoing the spirit of the original Silk Road. By investing in infrastructure projects across Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond, China is creating new economic opportunities for emerging markets, while simultaneously strengthening its role as a global economic leader. The global economy's increasing dependence on emerging markets reflects the same interconnectedness that characterized the ancient Silk Road. Just as the trade routes of the past allowed for the exchange of goods and ideas between far-flung regions, modern trade agreements, financial partnerships, and infrastructure projects create the foundation for economic growth in developing countries. These emerging markets are not only benefiting from the trade routes, but are also contributing to the larger economic network in ways similar to the way cities like Samarkand and Bokhara played central roles in the past. Globalization and the digital economy. One of the most significant transformations in the modern economy has been the rise of the digital age. The Silk Road was historically defined by the movement of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals across vast distances. Today, the movement of data, information, and digital goods plays a similar role in linking the economies of the world. In the same way that traders along the Silk Road exchanged products, knowledge, and ideas, today's digital economy enables the free flow of information, capital, and innovation. The rise of e-commerce giants like Amazon and Alibaba has revolutionized how goods are sold and purchased across borders. With digital payments, cloud services, and blockchain technology, goods are being bought and sold in new ways that mirror the spirit of ancient commerce. Additionally, the internet has become a new kind of Silk Road in itself, allowing businesses, governments, and individuals to connect instantaneously across vast distances. The digital Silk Road facilitates the flow of data, financial transactions, and intellectual property, creating new opportunities for trade and economic development. Like the ancient Silk Road, the digital economy is fueled by innovation, and its influence continues to grow as more people and businesses around the world join the global network. Economic diplomacy and the Silk Road legacy. Economic diplomacy. as exemplified by initiatives like the BRI, underscores the continued influence of the Silk Road in shaping modern international relations. Much like the ancient empires that competed for control of the trade routes, countries today are engaging in economic diplomacy to secure access to global markets and resources. The legacy of the Silk Road in diplomacy is clear in the way nations work to create new trade agreements, partnerships, and initiatives that extend their influence and foster economic cooperation. Economic diplomacy today often involves large-scale projects like infrastructure development, free trade agreements, and multilateral trade partnerships, all of which reflect the ancient spirit of exchange and collaboration along the Silk Road. Countries are also using economic diplomacy to position themselves as key players in the global market, just as the Byzantine Empire, Persia, and China did centuries ago. By leveraging economic ties, nations can exert soft power and influence, promote peace, and forge strategic partnerships, continuing the tradition of diplomacy that arose from the ancient Silk Road. Challenges and opportunities in modern trade. While the legacy of the Silk Road continues to shape global trade today, modern economies face many challenges that were not present in the ancient world. One major issue is the growing concern about the environmental impact of global trade. The vast transportation networks that facilitate the movement of goods around the world contribute to pollution, deforestation, and climate change. Governments, businesses, and international organizations are increasingly focusing on sustainability and finding ways to mitigate the environmental consequences of trade. At the same time, the growth of global trade presents numerous opportunities. The increased interconnectedness of economies around the world has led to the rise of new markets and new opportunities for businesses to expand internationally. For developing countries, being part of the global trade network has the potential to improve standards of living, create jobs, and drive economic growth. However, this is often accompanied by challenges such as income inequality, labor exploitation, and reliance on unsustainable resources, issues that were not addressed in the ancient Silk Road era. The Silk Road's role in fostering cross-cultural connections also remains relevant today. The exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures continues to drive the global economy and enrich societies across the world. In this sense, the Silk Road has helped to lay the foundation for the globalized, interconnected world of the 21st century, where people from different cultures can work together to solve the world's most pressing challenges. The Silk Road's influence on contemporary art, music, and fashion. While the ancient trade routes of the Silk Road were primarily known for their economic and cultural exchanges, the influence of these connections continues to manifest in modern art, music, and fashion. The flow of ideas, materials, and artistic techniques along the Silk Road centuries ago left an indelible mark on the world of creative expression. And today, we see the lasting impact of this historic exchange in global art forms, musical traditions, and fashion trends. Silk Road art and artistic traditions. One of the most enduring legacies of the Silk Road is the exchange of artistic techniques and styles across cultures. From China to Central Asia to the Mediterranean, the interaction of artists from different backgrounds led to the development of unique art forms that blended styles, motifs, and materials. These artistic exchanges continue to influence contemporary artists across the globe. For example, the Buddhist art that flourished along the Silk Road was heavily influenced by both Indian and Greek artistic traditions. The famous Buddhist cave paintings at Dunhuang, China, feature a mixture of traditional Chinese motifs and foreign influences, including Indian depictions of Buddha and Greco-Roman architectural elements. These caves became a melting pot of artistic styles, where Central Asian and Persian influences blended with Chinese traditions. In contemporary art, the spirit of the Silk Road is reflected in the fusion of different artistic practices. Many modern artists draw on the legacy of these cultural exchanges, blending Western, Eastern, and Central Asian influences in their work. For example, contemporary Chinese artists, such as Ai Weiwei and Zhang Huan, incorporate both traditional Chinese elements and modern global themes in their art, reflecting the cultural convergence that characterized the Silk Road. Similarly, artists from Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe continue to create work inspired by the Silk Road's artistic traditions. The use of intricate patterns, geometric designs, and vibrant colors seen in Persian carpets and Turkish tilework can be traced back to ancient Silk Road influences. These traditional motifs continue to inspire artists in diverse fields, from visual arts to graphic design and architecture. Silk Road music and cultural exchange. Just as the Silk Road facilitated the exchange of art and philosophy, it also played a vital role in the transmission of music. The movement of people and goods along the trade routes allowed for the cross-pollination of musical traditions. Instruments, scales, and melodies spread from one region to another, creating a rich tapestry of sounds that we continue to appreciate in contemporary music. For example, the instruments used along the Silk Road, such as the oud, a stringed instrument, the pipa, a Chinese plucked instrument, and the rebab, a type of stringed instrument popular in Persia, can still be heard in modern music. The oud, in particular, traveled from the Middle East to Europe, where it evolved into the modern guitar. Similarly, the pipa influenced the development of stringed instruments in Central Asia and the Middle East. The Silk Road's musical influence can also be seen in the fusion of different musical styles. Traditional Chinese, Persian, and Indian music has blended over the centuries with Western music, particularly in the realm of world music and popular genres. Contemporary musicians are increasingly incorporating the sounds of the Silk Road into their music, often by combining traditional instruments with modern genres like jazz, rock, and electronic music. One example of this is the Silk Road Ensemble, an international group of musicians founded by the renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma. The ensemble brings together musicians from diverse cultures, including China, India, Central Asia, and the Middle East, to perform music that reflects the Silk Road's rich history of cultural exchange. Through this initiative, Yo-Yo Ma has helped raise awareness of the Silk Road's role in connecting different musical traditions and fostering creative collaborations across cultures. Fashion. From silk to the runway. Perhaps one of the most enduring symbols of the Silk Road is silk itself. The trade of silk was the defining characteristic of the ancient Silk Road, and its legacy is still evident today in the world of fashion. The opulence of silk and its association with luxury have made it a symbol of refinement and wealth throughout history. Contemporary fashion. The influence of the Silk Road is visible in the use of silk fabrics, intricate embroidery, and vibrant patterns. High-end designers and fashion houses continue to draw inspiration from the traditional textiles that were once traded along the Silk Road. The patterns seen in Chinese silk robes, Persian carpets, and Indian textiles have become iconic in the world of modern fashion. The use of silk in clothing remains prevalent, especially in haute couture collections. Designers like Valentino, Chanel, and Yves Saint Laurent have frequently incorporated silk into their collections, often combining it with modern cuts and styles to create a blend of tradition and innovation. Additionally, traditional textiles from regions along the Silk Road, such as ikat fabrics from Central Asia and Kashmiri shawls from India, continue to influence contemporary fashion trends. Fashion weeks around the world regularly feature collections that incorporate elements inspired by the Silk Road. These collections often showcase traditional fabrics, such as silk and cashmere, alongside contemporary designs that reflect the timeless appeal of the ancient trade routes. For example, the fashion designer Etro is known for using Eastern-inspired prints and textiles in their collections, reflecting the deep influence of the Silk Road on global fashion. In addition to influencing high fashion, the Silk Road's impact can also be seen in street style and everyday clothing. The vibrant colors, geometric patterns, and luxurious fabrics that were traded along the Silk Road have found their way into global fashion consciousness, inspiring designers, artists, and consumers alike. Modern global trade and the Silk Road's role in fashion. In addition to the cultural exchange that shaped art, music, and fashion, the Silk Road's legacy continues to have a direct impact on modern trade. The flow of goods like silk, spices, and textiles along the ancient routes set the stage for the global fashion industry as we know it today. The interconnectedness that the Silk Road created in terms of commerce has led to the rise of a truly global fashion marketplace. Today, fashion is a global industry, with designers, manufacturers, and retailers from all corners of the world contributing to a vast, interconnected supply chain. Much like the Silk Road once facilitated the exchange of goods across continents, today's fashion industry relies on an interconnected web of global trade, with materials sourced from different regions and styles influenced by various cultures. The fashion industry's international nature is a direct descendant of the Silk Road's legacy of cross-cultural exchange. The Silk Road and its role in shaping modern diplomacy. The influence of the ancient Silk Road extends far beyond economics, culture, and trade. It also profoundly shaped the development of modern diplomacy and international relations. Just as the Silk Road was a space where civilizations met, exchanged ideas, and negotiated, the diplomatic principles that emerged from this global network of communication continue to influence modern diplomatic strategies. The spirit of negotiation, dialogue, and collaboration that defined the Silk Road is still very much alive in international politics and diplomacy today. The Silk Road as a model for international cooperation. The Silk Road was not merely a trade route. It was a region where diverse cultures, religions, and peoples interacted. These interactions required a level of diplomatic engagement and cooperation, often in the form of treaties, alliances, and mutual agreements. The successful functioning of the Silk Road depended on the ability of empires, kingdoms, and civilizations to negotiate and create agreements that allowed trade to flow smoothly across borders. Similarly, modern diplomacy is founded on the principles of negotiation, compromise, and cooperation between nations with different interests. Just as the ancient empires along the Silk Road used diplomacy to secure safe passage for merchants and traders, today's countries engage in diplomatic talks and international treaties to ensure the smooth movement of goods, people, and services across borders. One of the key aspects of Silk Road diplomacy was the ability to overcome differences in culture, religion, and political systems. Countries that traded along the route were often very different from one another. Yet the Silk Road proved that trade and mutual understanding could bridge those differences. Modern diplomacy continues to rely on the ability to bring together nations with differing ideologies and interests for the purpose of fostering cooperation and peace. The role of economic diplomacy and strategic alliances. Economic diplomacy, which has become a key focus in international relations, mirrors the strategies used by the empires and kingdoms along the ancient Silk Road. The empires that controlled the Silk Road recognized the importance of economic cooperation and trade as a tool for gaining influence, strengthening alliances, and expanding their power. Silk, spices, and other luxury goods were valuable commodities, and empires understood that the control of trade routes was a way to boost their economies and secure their political power. Today, countries use economic diplomacy to pursue similar goals. They negotiate trade deals, form economic alliances, and participate in international organizations that regulate trade and investment. The World Trade Organization (WTO), free trade agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA), and other multilateral platforms are modern equivalents to the kinds of agreements that helped regulate trade and establish diplomatic norms during the Silk Road era. In a world where economic power is closely linked to diplomatic influence, the legacy of the Silk Road can still be seen in the way countries vie for strategic control over key trade routes and economic hubs. Major global players such as China, the United States, and the European Union have long recognized the importance of infrastructure, trade networks, and economic diplomacy in securing their standing in the global community. The Silk Road and the development of multilateral diplomacy. While the Silk Road was historically a collection of bilateral agreements between different nations and empires, it also laid the groundwork for the idea of multilateral diplomacy, an approach in which multiple parties come together to negotiate and resolve issues. The Silk Road, in many ways, was one of the first instances of multilateral cooperation, with numerous states and cultures interacting, negotiating, and working together to ensure the flow of trade across vast regions. In the modern world, multilateral diplomacy is a key element of international relations. International organizations like the United Nations, UN, the European Union, EU, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, serve as platforms for countries to engage in dialogue and negotiation on a range of global issues, from trade to environmental concerns to peacekeeping. The principles of multilateral diplomacy, as seen in these organizations, echo the spirit of the Silk Road. Today, countries understand the importance of cooperation and compromise in the face of shared challenges. Whether through climate change negotiations or global economic summits, the Silk Road's legacy lives on in the way countries collaborate to address global issues. Modern Silk Road diplomacy, the Belt and Road Initiative. Perhaps the most direct modern parallel to the ancient Silk Road is China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), launched in 2013. This ambitious infrastructure and development project aims to revive and modernize the ancient Silk Road trade routes through the construction of roads, railways, ports, and energy pipelines that connect Asia, Africa, and Europe. The BRI is an example of how the ancient diplomatic principles of the Silk Road are being applied in the 21st century. The BRI has significant diplomatic implications, as it involves over 140 countries and international organizations. It's a strategic and economic effort to deepen China's influence by enhancing trade and investment with countries along the ancient Silk Road routes. Through the BRI, China aims to foster stronger economic ties with countries across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and Africa, while also promoting cultural exchanges and cooperation. The diplomatic negotiations surrounding the BRI are a modern-day extension of the principles that governed the original Silk Road. Just as the ancient empires negotiated terms of trade, provided safe passage, and engaged in cultural diplomacy, China's BRI relies on negotiations with other countries to create mutually beneficial partnerships. It is an effort to modernize trade routes and build new infrastructure that will enable greater connectivity and cooperation between regions. However, the BRI has also raised some concerns, particularly regarding debt sustainability, political influence, and the potential for geopolitical tensions. Critics argue that the initiative may lead to debt traps for participating countries, particularly in developing regions, while others view it as an opportunity for mutual growth and development. The success of the BRI will depend on how well China manages its diplomatic relationships and how it navigates the challenges of multilateral cooperation. Silk Road diplomacy and soft power. The concept of soft power is central to modern diplomacy and can be traced back to the cultural exchanges that took place along the Silk Road. Soft power refers to the ability of a country to influence others through cultural, diplomatic, and non-coercive means, rather than through military or economic force. Just as the exchange of ideas, religions, and philosophies along the Silk Road helped shape global culture and influence, today's countries use soft power to enhance their influence on the world stage. Countries like the United States, China, and Japan have all used their cultural influence through programs like cultural diplomacy, educational exchanges, and international media to increase their global standing. For example, China's Confucius Institutes, which promote Chinese language and culture around the world, and the United States Fulbright Program, which supports international exchange and collaboration, are examples of how nations today continue to build relationships and promote understanding, much as the ancient cultures of the Silk Road did. Similarly, the spread of religions like Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity along the Silk Road had a lasting impact on the cultures and societies that came into contact with these teachings. Today, religious diplomacy continues to be an important aspect of international relations, as nations use their religious and cultural identities to influence and build bridges with other countries. Conclusion: the enduring legacy of Silk Road diplomacy. The diplomacy of the Silk Road was not just about trade. It was about building relationships, fostering cooperation, and promoting mutual understanding. The principles of dialogue, negotiation, and cultural exchange that defined the Silk Road era continue to be central to modern diplomacy. Whether through economic partnerships, multilateral negotiations, or cultural exchanges, the spirit of the Silk Road lives on in today's global diplomatic efforts. In many ways, the Silk Road was the birthplace of modern diplomacy, demonstrating the power of international cooperation and the shared benefits of peaceful exchange. As nations continue to face challenges that transcend borders, the lessons learned from the Silk Road will continue to guide diplomatic strategies for years to come. The future of the Silk Road: opportunities and challenges. As we look toward the future, the legacy of the Silk Road continues to shape the global landscape in both positive and complex ways. The revitalization of ancient trade routes, coupled with the rapid advancement of technology and shifting global power dynamics, presents both exciting opportunities and significant challenges. In many ways, the modern Silk Road is just beginning to take form, and how nations approach these opportunities will determine the next chapter in the Silk Road story. The digital Silk Road and global connectivity. One of the most significant opportunities for the future of the Silk Road is the rise of the digital economy. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected through the internet, digital technologies, and online commerce, the concept of the digital Silk Road is emerging as a key player in modern global trade and diplomacy. The digital Silk Road is characterized by the expansion of information technology infrastructure, global data flows, and the movement of services and digital goods across borders. China, in particular, has played a leading role in promoting the digital Silk Road through investments in 5G networks, broadband infrastructure, and digital platforms like e-commerce giant Alibaba. By providing the infrastructure for greater internet access and facilitating cross-border online trade, the digital Silk Road promises to further integrate economies and facilitate global commerce in ways that mirror the physical exchanges that took place along the ancient Silk Road. As digital technologies continue to develop, opportunities for innovation, communication, and commerce will expand. The rise of artificial intelligence, AI, blockchain, and e-commerce platforms will enhance the ease of conducting business across borders, making global trade more efficient, transparent, and accessible. The digital Silk Road also presents an opportunity to bridge the digital divide between developed and developing countries by enabling access to technology and information that were once unavailable. However, with these opportunities come challenges related to cybersecurity, digital privacy, and unequal access to technology. While the digital Silk Road can foster inclusivity, it also risks deepening the digital divide in regions that lack the infrastructure or resources to fully participate in the global digital economy. As governments, businesses, and international organizations continue to build the infrastructure for the digital Silk Road, it will be essential to address these disparities and ensure that all regions benefit from the new opportunities that are being created. Geopolitical tensions and the Belt and Road Initiative. Another key aspect of the modern Silk Road is the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), a massive infrastructure and investment project spearheaded by China. The BRI seeks to rebuild and expand the Silk Road trade routes by constructing roads, railways, ports, and energy pipelines that connect China to Africa, Europe, and beyond. It represents an ambitious effort to foster economic growth, enhance trade, and promote regional connectivity. While the BRI has the potential to promote economic development and create new trade opportunities for participating countries, it also presents geopolitical challenges. The initiative has drawn criticism from some Western countries and analysts who argue that it could lead to increased Chinese influence and create dependency among developing nations. There are concerns that some countries may struggle to repay the large loans associated with BRI projects, leading to long-term debt and economic instability. Additionally, the BRI has the potential to shift global power dynamics, especially as China seeks to expand its geopolitical footprint. While the initiative offers significant economic opportunities for countries along the Silk Road, it also raises questions about the balance of power and influence in the 21st century. The success of the BRI will depend on how China manages its diplomatic relationships with other major powers, especially the United States, the European Union, and India. As the BRI progresses, it will be important for participating countries to ensure that projects are sustainable, transparent, and mutually beneficial. International cooperation and a shared commitment to fair trade, environmental sustainability, and debt management will be critical to ensuring that the BRI fulfills its potential without creating long-term economic and political instability. Environmental sustainability and the Silk Road. As the world moves into the 21st century, environmental sustainability is becoming a growing concern in global trade and development. The rapid expansion of infrastructure along the modern Silk Road, including roads, railways, and ports, has the potential to cause significant environmental damage if not managed carefully. The construction of large-scale infrastructure projects can lead to deforestation, habitat destruction, and pollution, which can have lasting consequences for the ecosystems along the Silk Road. To address these challenges, there will need to be a focus on sustainable development practices that prioritize environmental protection while promoting economic growth. International agreements, such as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, will play a key role in shaping how countries approach the environmental challenges posed by global trade and infrastructure projects. China has already made strides in promoting green infrastructure through its focus on renewable energy projects as part of the BRI. For example, China has invested in solar power plants, wind farms, and other sustainable energy sources in several BRI countries. These investments reflect the growing recognition that the future of global trade must be environmentally responsible. As the modern Silk Road continues to develop, it will be essential for all countries involved to prioritize environmental sustainability in their infrastructure projects. This could include adopting green technologies, promoting the use of renewable energy, and ensuring that trade routes and development projects are designed with the environment in mind. By integrating sustainability into the modern Silk Road, countries can help ensure that future generations inherit a world that is both economically prosperous and environmentally sustainable. Cultural diplomacy and bridging divides. Another important opportunity presented by the modern Silk Road is the potential for cultural diplomacy. Just as the ancient Silk Road facilitated the exchange of ideas, religions, and cultural practices, today's globalized world offers similar opportunities for dialogue and mutual understanding. Cultural diplomacy, which uses the power of culture to foster understanding and cooperation between nations, is a key element of modern international relations. The modern Silk Road can be an important platform for cultural exchange, helping to bridge divides between East and West, North and South. By promoting people-to-people connections, educational exchanges, and cultural programs, nations can build relationships based on shared values, mutual respect, and collaboration. For example, through initiatives such as the Confucius Institutes, China has been able to promote its language, culture, and values across the globe. Similarly, other countries are using their cultural assets to foster goodwill and improve diplomatic relations. Cultural diplomacy has the potential to create a more inclusive and peaceful world by encouraging dialogue and fostering a greater understanding of different cultures and traditions. However, cultural diplomacy also faces challenges in a world where national identities and political ideologies often come into conflict. Ensuring that cultural exchanges remain genuine and do not become tools for political influence will be crucial for maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of cultural diplomacy efforts. The future of the Silk Road, a global legacy. The future of the Silk Road is both promising and complex. The ancient trade routes, which once connected distant civilizations, are being reimagined in new ways through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, the Digital Silk Road, and global trade networks. These modern developments offer unprecedented opportunities for economic growth, cultural exchange, and international cooperation. At the same time, the challenges associated with these efforts, geopolitical tensions, environmental sustainability, and cultural diplomacy, will require careful management and collaboration among countries. The success of the modern Silk Road will depend on how nations balance economic development with environmental protection, how they address the concerns of global stakeholders, and how they foster an inclusive and sustainable global trade network. In many ways, the Silk Road's enduring legacy is a testament to the power of human connection and collaboration. The opportunities for cooperation, innovation, and exchange that the Silk Road created centuries ago continue to shape our world today. As we look toward the future, it is clear that the Silk Road's legacy will continue to influence global trade, diplomacy, and culture for generations to come. Reflections on the legacy of the Silk Road and its continuing relevance. The history of the Silk Road is a rich tapestry woven from centuries of trade, cultural exchange, and diplomatic engagement between East and West. This ancient network of routes, stretching from China through Central Asia and the Middle East to Europe, created an unparalleled link between civilizations, fostering the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. As we look back on the journey of the Silk Road, it is evident that its legacy is not just a historical phenomenon. It continues to shape the modern world in countless ways. The enduring spirit of the Silk Road. At its core, the Silk Road was not just a set of trade routes. It was a symbol of human connection. The movement of goods like silk, spices, and precious stones was only part of the story. The deeper and more lasting impact came from the exchange of knowledge, culture, religion, and philosophy. In a world that was much more divided by geographical and cultural barriers than today, the Silk Road was a reminder that even vast distances and differences could be bridged through collaboration and mutual respect. The spirit of the Silk Road, of connection, cooperation, and shared progress, is more relevant today than ever before. As the world faces global challenges like climate change, economic inequality, and geopolitical tensions, the principles that govern the Silk Road, dialogue, cultural exchange, and international cooperation, remain essential for addressing these issues. Modern international efforts to address global challenges, such as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, can draw lessons from the Silk Road. Just as ancient civilizations learned to work together for mutual benefit along the Silk Road, today's nations must find ways to collaborate across borders to tackle issues that transcend national interests. Global trade and interdependence. One of the greatest legacies of the Silk Road is the interconnectedness it fostered between civilizations. The trade routes that stretched across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe were not just paths for the movement of goods. They were highways for the flow of ideas, innovations, and cultural influences. The movement of technologies such as paper, gunpowder, and the printing press, as well as the spread of religions like Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, had far-reaching effects on societies on both sides of the world. Today, the global economy is more interconnected than ever. The world's supply chains span continents, and trade agreements and economic partnerships shape international relations. The modern Silk Road, through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and the Digital Silk Road, continues to promote interdependence and foster international trade. As countries become more economically linked, they are presented with new opportunities for collaboration, even as they must address the challenges that come with greater interdependence. The globalized nature of trade today mirrors the interconnectedness that once existed along the ancient Silk Road. Just as traders, scholars, and diplomats along the Silk Road found ways to exchange ideas and goods despite their differences, modern economies can and must find ways to cooperate and innovate to face the challenges of the future. Cultural exchange and mutual understanding. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of the Silk Road was its role as a bridge for cultural exchange. The Silk Road was a meeting point for diverse civilizations: Chinese, Indian, Persian, Roman, and Byzantine, each with their unique traditions, languages, and religions. Over the centuries, the flow of people, ideas, and art created a rich cultural fusion that has left its mark on literature, architecture, art, and philosophy. In a world where division and conflict often arise from cultural differences, the Silk Road's legacy of mutual respect and collaboration is a valuable reminder. The historical Silk Road was not just about trade. It was about the sharing of ideas, from the philosophies of Confucianism and Buddhism to the scientific advancements of the Islamic Golden Age. Today, cultural diplomacy remains an important part of international relations, fostering dialogue between nations and encouraging the exchange of ideas. Cultural exchanges, facilitated by initiatives like the Confucius Institutes, the Fulbright Program, and international arts festivals, continue to promote understanding across borders. These programs reflect the same principles that govern the Silk Road, encouraging people from different cultures to engage with one another, share their stories, and appreciate their differences. In many ways, the cultural diversity fostered along the Silk Road laid the foundation for today's multicultural societies. The values of tolerance, exchange, and learning from others that define the Silk Road are essential in a world that is increasingly interconnected and diverse. As global migration continues, and as cultures continue to mix and merge, the Silk Road's legacy reminds us of the power of cross-cultural exchange in creating a more harmonious world. The role of modern technology in reviving the Silk Road. The Silk Road's influence continues to resonate in the 21st century, particularly through modern technological innovations. The Digital Silk Road, which focuses on the expansion of internet connectivity, data infrastructure, and digital trade, is a natural evolution of the ancient trade routes that once linked the East and West. Today, technologies like 5G networks, e-commerce, and blockchain are redefining the way goods, services, and information are exchanged across borders. The internet, much like the ancient Silk Road, has become a vast global highway for the exchange of information, connecting people from all corners of the world. From online marketplaces like Alibaba to digital financial systems like cryptocurrency, the Digital Silk Road reflects the same spirit of interconnectedness that once defined its predecessor. Just as merchants along the original Silk Road relied on physical infrastructure to transport goods, modern economies rely on digital infrastructure to move information, trade, and capital. The rise of e-commerce and digital payments has also democratized trade in ways that the ancient Silk Road could not. Today, small businesses from developing countries can sell their products to global markets, bypassing traditional trade barriers. This digital economy represents an opportunity for countries and communities along the modern Silk Road to engage in commerce and innovation that was once reserved for more developed economies. However, with these opportunities come challenges. The Digital Silk Road also raises concerns about cybersecurity, digital privacy, and inequality in access to technology. Ensuring that all nations and people benefit from the digital revolution will be a key task for policymakers, just as the management of trade routes and infrastructure was crucial for the ancient Silk Road's success. Looking toward the future, the legacy of the Silk Road is not just about looking back at history. It is about how we move forward in a rapidly changing world. The principles of trade, cultural exchange, and collaboration that once defined the Silk Road are more relevant than ever in the context of modern challenges. Whether through physical infrastructure like the BRI, digital platforms that enable global trade, or cultural diplomacy that fosters understanding between nations, the Silk Road's enduring legacy continues to shape the way we connect and cooperate on a global scale. In the face of global challenges, climate change, economic inequality, and political conflict, the Silk Road offers a powerful model of international cooperation and shared prosperity. The exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures that began on those ancient trade routes set the stage for a world that is more interconnected and interdependent than ever before. As we move forward, we can draw upon the lessons of the Silk Road to build a more collaborative, sustainable, and peaceful global future. The enduring legacy of the Silk Road and its global impact. As we conclude our journey through the history of the Silk Road, it's clear that its legacy is much more than a collection of ancient trade routes connecting the East and West. The Silk Road was a testament to the power of human connection, where diverse cultures, ideas, and innovations came together and left an indelible mark on the world. From the exchange of goods like silk and spices to the spread of philosophies, religions, and technologies, the Silk Road laid the foundation for the interconnected global community we live in today. While the physical routes of the Silk Road have faded over time, its spirit lives on in the modern world through international trade, cultural diplomacy, and digital connectivity. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI, the Digital Silk Road, and the principles of cross-border cooperation all reflect the enduring power of the ancient Silk Road. In a world that is becoming increasingly interconnected, the lessons of the Silk Road, mutual respect, collaboration, and the exchange of knowledge continue to resonate. The story of the Silk Road is far from over. It is a story that evolves with every technological breakthrough, every trade agreement, and every cross-cultural dialogue that shapes our world today. The legacy of the Silk Road is a reminder of our shared humanity and the potential for cooperation, innovation, and peace that lies within our global connections. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of the Silk Road. From its humble beginnings as a series of trade routes to its lasting impact on global trade, culture, and diplomacy, the Silk Road is a testament to the power of connection. Whether through ancient caravans or modern digital networks, the spirit of the Silk Road continues to unite us in a shared mission of progress, collaboration, and understanding. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Silk Road's incredible legacy, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth documentaries and historical insights. We've got plenty of similar videos on our channel that dive deep into other fascinating topics from history, so be sure to check them out. Join us again as we continue to explore the stories that have shaped our world. Until next time, take care and keep exploring the wonders of history.